Live from Quito, Ecuador, I'm Soini Gray, and this is From the South, the Midday News Brief from Tell Us Your English. We start this new edition right now. For the 25th year running, the United Nations General Assembly has almost expressed unanimous opposition to the United States economic blockade of Cuba. 191 countries voted against. Only the United States and Israel voted for. One after another, representatives of the African group of companies, the G77 plus China, the Non-Aligned Movement, the ASEAN group of Southeast Asian nations, and CARICOM all condemned the blockade, which Cuba says has cost it $753.9 billion in the last 55 years.
The blockade is contrary to international law. Its aggressive extraterritorial implementation harms the sovereignty of all states. It also damages economic and business interests throughout the world. Mr. President, the U.S. ambassador failed to mention that the blockade is a flagrant, massive, and systematic violation of the human rights of all Cubans, men and women. It, under the Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide of 1948, can be defined as an act of genocide. It is an obstacle to the international humanitarian cooperation that Cuba offers to 81 countries in the South. The human damage caused by the implementation of this policy is incalculable.
Speaking for the 15 Caribbean nations of CARICOM, the representative of St. Vincent and the Grenadines said the blockade hurts not only Cuba, but the entire Caribbean.
The member states of CARICOM have maintained close relations with Cuba throughout the years of their independence, and this relationship has been strengthened through a wide range of programs of cooperation in areas including trade, healthcare, infrastructure, and human resource development. In 2015, the international community adopted the 2030 Agenda, which sets goals to guide the creation of the future we want and which aims at leaving no one behind. Our future regional development is, in many ways, reliant upon our collective advancement and progress. This blockade works contrarily to these aspirations to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Striving for peace and the right to development have been the deepest concerns of each member of our Caribbean community since gaining independence. In this context, we view the embargo not just as a punitive act against Cuba, but as an impediment to our shared regional development.
Venezuela's president congratulated Cuba on the results of the vote at the UN. Nicolas Maduro tweeted, "A great victory for Cuba at the UN. 191 governments and people say no more blockade. Venezuela would always be with Cuba. Long live our great Latin America." In boxers. Away from the United Nations, the Netherlands has said its trade with Cuba increased by 11% last year as the Caribbean country approaches its foreign investment goals despite the U.S. blockade. This was announced during the Havana 35th International Fair. The island received more than $2,000 million in foreign investments despite the Trump administration tightening the blockade that went into effect in 1962. This is helping Cuba develop tourism, construction, mining, and renewable energies.
And from the Dutch government, we are investing in the relationship with Cuba, the economic relationship between Cuba and the Netherlands. And we see in terms of trade that our trade is growing for 11% last year.
So we are hoping to go live to our Washington correspondent, Jorge Hestoso, to talk more about that very historic UN vote. But in the meantime, we have some other stories. So in his Independence Day message to the nation, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Gaston Brown, spoke to his countrymen and women about entrepreneurial socialism. Brown says in its 36th year of independence, the country needs to adopt an economic model that combines socialism and capitalism for a new model of governance and private-public sector partnership. He says in the coming weeks he will release a document that clearly illustrates his plan. He did, however, take time to address criticisms of his new policy.
Detractors of this proposal, particularly one non-national business enterprise, has maliciously described it as, and I quote, anti-private sector, end of quote. Nothing could be further from the truth. And I should set down a marker on this, our 36th anniversary of independence, that private sector investment, both local and foreign, is both welcome and encouraged. What is not welcome and will never be encouraged are slick and ruthless business practices that deprive the people of Antigua and Barbuda of their just earnings, exploits workers, ignores the rights of nationals, and misappropriates revenues properly due to the nation's treasury.
More news in a minute. Stay with us. The political differences within Ecuador's ruling party, the País Alliance, reached a breaking point on Tuesday night when the leadership said it was removing the country's president, Lenin Moreno, as the president of the party. The executive secretary of País Alliance, Gabriela Rivadera, said Moreno had favored groups and individuals who were opposed to Ecuador's citizen revolution launched by former President Rafael Correa a decade ago. She also said the president had failed to turn up to party meetings for 3 months.
According to the absence record presented at the national office, it is confirmed that the president of the Alianza País party has a record of constant and unjustified absences to the national board sessions. In that sense, it is the board's duty to fulfill what is written in the party's set of rules, which establishes the destitution of the president.
So immediately after that announcement, other leading figures from the País Alliance went on television to defend him and insist that he remains the leader of the movement.
In several regional directorates, where the majority have proclaimed their full support not only to the national government, everyone's government, Alianza País government, but their president, the president of all Ecuadorian citizens, the president of Alianza País, who is Lenin Moreno Garcés. We have also witnessed how more than half of the 44 assembly members have joined us in our indisputable support for the work of the president, the actions to reach a national dialogue, and particularly to carry out the referendum.
My colleague Carla Gonzalez has been following the developments here in Quito, and she joins us now. So Carla, what exactly are the leaders of the País Alliance giving us reasons for removing Lenin Moreno?
So not only, well, they said that the reason was because they wanted to punish him because he didn't go to the meetings for the past 3 months. But it's also true that he has breached some of the laws, internal laws of Alianza País Alliance, the party, the ruling party right now. And according to Article 9, the leaders of the party should respect each other and should work towards a unity inside the movement. So they are saying that they will take him to an ethics commission to analyze why he has shifted from the original plan that he promoted during the campaign and that he has done for the past months in the government.
So, Carla, his supporters say that Lenin Moreno has the backing of most local bodies of the party, and that's why the leadership moved against him. Is there any evidence of this?
So the acting vice president, María Alejandra Vicuña, she says that at least 43 members of the National Assembly are supporting Moreno. But it's also true that there's a strong division inside the party for the past 3 months, past 5 months since Moreno took office. And for the past 3 months that the main leaders of Alianza País resigned from the government, including Patiño, which is right now the current leader, the current president of Alianza País, saying that Moreno had pacts with the oligarchy, with the right-wing businessmen in the country, with the most wealthy bankers and politicians in the country. So there's also a division there that's very much present. And well, Vicuña has also said that the government will not accept what the directorate, the leaders of Alianza País have announced as removing Moreno from his position as president of the party.
Now, we also understand that party leaders are also inviting former President Rafael Correa to come back from Belgium to help relaunch the party. What does that mean?
Yes, so Patiño announced yesterday that they are calling on Correa to come back to Ecuador. He left after May 25th when Moreno took office, to come back and see this reconstruction of the party, to come back and also campaign in the possible next elections inside Ecuador. Of course, Alianza País relies on his leadership and his charisma to win elections and to complete the citizens' revolution that Correa created more than 10 years ago when he arrived to the country. Of course, Correa has said that Moreno does not represent the citizens' revolution anymore. He has called him a traitor and has said that he has drifted from what the bases want in a leader in Ecuador.
Thank you so much for that update, Carla Gonzalez. Carla is one of our reporters in the newsroom right here in Ecuador. Thank you so much for that update. Ecuador's indigenous groups will no longer have to cough up $1 million on legal fees that Chevron, the oil giant, had earlier claimed from them. The Canadian court dismissed Chevron's claim to legal fees, saying it was an attempt to block the case. The decision marks an important victory for the indigenous people in the region, as they can now continue with their 5-year fight, where they're seeking $9.5 billion for decade-long damage to their ancestral lands and trauma caused to the inhabitants. The Movement for Landless Peoples, the MTST, organized a historical march, 23 kilometers of walking to Sao Paulo's government palace. Their demands included housing and the restoration of housing programs stopped by Michel Temer's administration. Our team in Brazil followed the routes.
A couple of hours after Brazilian police censored Caetano Veloso's concert on the Fearless People occupation, 20,000 homeless people rallied from different places around Sao Paulo, arriving to the government palace with the demand of decent housing.
We're here searching for a dream, the dream that all Brazilian people have, to own a house and to create their own family with shelter.
Families are bemoaning the fact that salaries don't allow them to be able to afford rent. And on the same day, Michel Temer reduced, for the second time this year, the minimum wage for 2018. Besides the 13 million unemployed in Brazil, those with jobs will have to survive with $300.
I don't have a job. I'm old and I'm trying to retire, but I can't. I have already paid everything, but it's still really hard. With Temer, it's difficult. Temer destroyed Brazil.
New protesters from different occupations emerged during the rally. Morumbi's Bridge has been the meeting point for several MSTS demonstrations, and here they are demanding Guerra Alckmin's government to restore social programs. Around 8,000 families from the Fearless People occupation are disputing an idle land with a construction company which has owned it for 40 years. These situations are very common in Sao Paulo. During the rally, the interactions between construction workers and the homeless workers show the contradictions regarding the issues.
We got a class division problem here in Brazil. Those who receive the My House program with a second and third category, and those who are in the first category that the government is ignoring.
70 million people, a third of Brazil's population, are not able to have access to decent housing. Brazil's Movement for the Homeless, MTST, will hold a meeting with authorities to discuss urgent measures to solve this situation.
Women in Honduras are asking their presidential candidates to work on inclusive plans that bring solutions to the 65% of women who are the heads of their households. Most of them are unemployed and many face violence.
52% of the population in Honduras are women. According to the Statistics Institute, poverty mostly affects this social group.
The situation is getting worse, as well as the laws that are benefiting just one sector that corresponds to wealthy women. But the most vulnerable sector, the poor women, are not benefiting from these laws.
Regarding the youth, the wives of the candidates affirmed that the violence and poverty is a direct consequence of the lack of interest from the state.
Apart from bureaucracy, it's important to take action regarding the children that don't have a father, but only a mother who supports them and guides them through life. They can become criminals or prostitutes. Let's do something for them.
Indigenous leaders affirm that their communities have never been in the government agenda, and because of that, their women are suffering.
Indigenous women traditionally work the land, but they are not a priority. Most of them work in agriculture, but they do not own the land. It's necessary that we work to create a new program regarding the agrarian law.
Until now, just a few candidates have spoken about the issues that women and the youth face. The opposition is working on a plan that takes into account this group's demands.
We are restoring their status as we give women the importance that they should have in the National Institute for Women. We are going to fight discrimination and lower wages for women. In Congress, only 25% of representatives are women.
According to the National Institute of Statistics, unemployment hits women in Honduras at a rate of 10%. They are also victims of forced displacements and femicide.
Online nominations for Venezuela's municipal elections are closing this Wednesday. The president of Venezuela's Electoral Council, Tibisay Lucena, said 18 of the 22 political parties registered in Venezuela have put forward candidates for the election in December.
Until now, 4,800 candidates have registered online. From this group, 4,016 are men and 784 are women. Only 18 nominations have been registered at the municipal councils so far.
Our correspondent Regan Devines joins us now live from Caracas. Hello, Regan. It seems that the opposition is keeping to their promise to not take part in the elections. Is that true?
Yes, so and it seems true thus far. We have three of them coming under sharp fire from Venezuela's left, particularly today from Jorge Rodriguez, who is the Caracas mayor. He said that it is undemocratic for the opposition to not take part. He released a statement today saying, opposition political parties are once again calling for destabilization, violence and anguish of the population. It seems that they long for the days when Venezuelans were burned alive just because of their skin color or because of their political affiliations. And he goes on to identify that Voluntad Popular, one of the opposition groups that will not be taking part, is a very violent and criminal organization. There is some concern around Voluntad Popular because they were assumed to have been inspiration for the violent far right during those months of opposition protests. We saw their leader, Henry Guevara, Freddy Guevara, I apologize, who was seen congratulating, thanking, shaking hands with with guarimbas. Those are people that block the streets and quite often attack persons and vehicles. And it's a concern because we've seen deaths this year of persons who were just assumed to have been supporters of the government based on the color of t-shirt that they're wearing or based on the color of their skin. So these elections are always a concern to Venezuela's left, the government, because it's a time when Venezuela's right has shown itself to be quite violent. So, yes, Sonia.
Thank you so much for that update. That is our Reagan Devines in Telesio's offices in Caracas. We are still crossing the Mapuche territories, but this time we're showing you the shocking contrast between the land still protected by the communities and the businesses of the multinational logging companies that are laying bare this privileged natural environment in the far south of the continent. So this is the second in a series of special reports by Paula Dragnich and Juan Pablo Arenela.
To the naked eye, this green landscape can be misleading. It looks like a natural forest, but it isn't. These are thousands of hectares of industrial plantations of pine and eucalyptus, genetically controlled and harvested systematically, mainly to produce cellulose. The ecosystem is no more. Natural water sources, life itself, cannot develop in this arid and acid soil. Before, there were Mapuche communities living here.
The communities always lived around these hills. These hills were their point of reference, in the traditional vision we have between man and nature and everything this relationship provides. From balance and biodiversity to Litrophilemonian, Machuquimun and everything we Mapuche know as the forms of life and the conception of man and the world.
The Mapuche's demand to recover the land is not a whim. There are still some protected spaces that survive as a result of their resistance. Areas where the water, the hills, and the ancient araucaria trees express this Mapuche philosophy, in which the identity and territory cannot be separated.
We are Mapuche, people from the land, people who are in direct connection with the territory. That's why it's our responsibility to recover our land, so this territory can live again.
The government of Salvador Allende promoted a reform to give them back their lands. But during the Pinochet dictatorship and the democratic governments that followed, the Mapuche were left with crumbs and their lands were given away to companies.
Our territory has been devastated by capitalism and multinational companies, because the Chilean state has given these lands to foreign people for them to fill their pockets with money, while our people are still living in poverty, squeezed into tiny communities. That's why we, as Mapuche youth, have the responsibility to take up this fight again.
The logging companies dominate over 3 million hectares, today owned by Winca families, as they call the white settlers in the Mapudungun language. All this thanks to the millions of dollars in subsidies from the Chilean state, and to the police who protect these businesses, repressing the Mapuche's attempts to recover their land, resources, and autonomy. The Mapuche also reject their assistantialism of what they call forced inclusion by the state.
These communities live basically from agriculture, animal husbandry, and also what we call productive reappropriation. The state calls this a crime. They say we are stealing wood. We say we are taking back the raw material located on the land that was stolen from us.
And, according to them, they're willing to recover whatever they can, however they can.
Back in a minute, stay with us. Welcome back, and here's a roundup of some of the stories making headlines around the world.
Power sharing talks in Northern Ireland have collapsed after Sinn Féin and the DUP failed to reach an agreement. According to Sinn Féin, the difficulties in reaching a deal were compounded by the agreement the DUP made with Theresa May to prop up her government after the recent snap elections. As a result, the British government will begin the process of directly imposing an annual budget for Northern Ireland for the first time in a decade. British Prime Minister Theresa May says that action would be taken when there are allegations and evidence of sexual misconduct in Parliament. This comes after May's deputy Damien Green faces an allegation that he made an inappropriate sexual advance on a young woman. Allegations have also been made against other ministers and senior politicians.
I hope we will all send a message from this House today that we want people in this place to be able to feel confident to bring forward cases, and we need to ensure that those cases are dealt with in a way that people can have confidence on both sides that they will be properly investigated. That means, and I want to see a good process within this Parliament so that people feel they do not have to go to a party political process in order to have their allegations considered.
The state of emergency has ended in France after 2 years. This comes after a new anti-terrorism law came into effect that gives police extended powers to search properties, conduct electronic eavesdropping and shut mosques or other locations suspected of preaching hatred. The Prime Minister assured citizens that they will still be protected.
I know that now that the state of emergency has come to an end, and that we are no longer in a context marked by the state of emergency, that some of our fellow citizens fear the intensity of our efforts in terms of security could drop. It is quite the opposite. The French people will continue to see policemen, gendarmes in the street and soldiers part of the Sentinel operation, which will continue.
Groups of refugees, mainly Syrian women and children, stranded in Greek camps, pitched tents outside the country's parliament to protect against delays in being reunited with relatives in Germany. Some of the demonstrators say they were starting a hunger strike. The refugees say they have been waiting for up to a year or more, despite receiving assurances from the Greek government. State prosecutors will argue on Friday that Oscar Pistorius' 6-year jail term for murdering his girlfriend is too short and should be extended. At trial, the prosecuting lawyer had sought a sentence of at least 15 years for the former champion athlete who killed his girlfriend Reva Steenkamp on Valentine's Day 2013.
We've come to the end of this midday news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, tellusyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Soini Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
Un pueblo es su memoria, de dónde venimos, quiénes somos.